This is the government's My Plate recommendations created by the USDA. That's the Department of Agriculture. Wait a minute. Why is the Department of Agriculture telling us what to eat? The answer is obvious. Their clients are the farmers growing the food, so we have to eat whatever they grow. If there were a lot of raccoon farmers instead of cow farmers, they'd be telling us to eat raccoons or drink raccoon milk. Here's what they advise. We are advised to eat 2 cups a day of fruit. Now, what would happen if we ate 3 cups of fruit or 4? Are there any studies that show that people who eat 3 cups of fruit get sick? No. We know how terrifically healthy fruit is. We know that Americans are terribly fiber deficient, so why stop at 2 cups? Well, 2 cups of fruit will supply about 150 calories. The committee making these recommendations didn't want to go higher, and I'll show you why in a minute. The committee recommends that we have 3 cups of vegetables. Now, are there any studies out there in the literature, any studies that 4 cups of vegetables will harm you in some way? Of course not. 3 cups of vegetables will likely provide about 300 to 400 calories. So between the fruits and the vegetables, we're at about 500 calories. They now recommend 7 ounces. 7 ounces, measure them, 7 ounces of grains, not 8, God forbid, 7 ounces of grains. Now, are there any studies that eating 8 or 10 or 12 ounces of whole grains has a downside? Of course not. How many calories will you get from 7 ounces of grains? That depends on the grain, but a good guess might be 200 to 300 calories from the 7 ounces of grain. So now we're at about 700 or 800 calories. Now we go down to something they call protein. 6 ounces from what they call the protein group. Now look at this group. What in the world does an egg have in common with a lentil? How did this get to be a group? But according to the half-wits at the USDA, this is an actual category of food because they all contain protein. But vegetables also contain protein. How come they didn't get in the group? Romaine lettuce has more protein per calorie than meat. Grains also contain protein. How come they can't get it? How did roast beef get in the same category as cannellini beans? This is self-evident insanity. In spite of the fact that there isn't a single legitimate study in 70 years, not one, showing any health benefit to eating animal flesh. And there are countless studies that show the opposite. These recommendations suggest 6 ounces of, among other things, animal flesh. Well, that could add up to about 500 calories right there before anyone lathers any sauces on the steak, as people inevitably do, or cook it in oil. So now we're up to the final recommendation, 3 cups of dairy. Well, if that's 3 cups of milk, that's 450 calories. They want grown men and women to drink 3 cups of milk a day? Who would do that? Now, if it's 3 cups of cheese, then we're talking about 1,500 calories. Let's say it's 1 cup of cheese and 2 cups of milk. That's 800 calories. So if we've got 800 calories from dairy, 500 calories from a mere 6-ounce piece of animal flesh before adding any sauces or oils, that's 1,300 calories right there, roughly half to 2/3 of a normal daily intake, yet with 0 fiber. And if the animal flesh you cook turns out to be 8 or 10 ounces instead of 6, and if it's lathered in sauces and cooked in oil, now you might be talking 1,200 calories from the animal flesh and 800 from the dairy, a full day's calories. No wonder you have to limit your intake of grains and vegetables and fruits. You damn well better limit those pesky fruits and vegetables to leave room for the highly caloric animal flesh and lactation products. But what if you were to choose from the alleged protein group 6 ounces of beans instead of animal flesh? Then you're talking maybe 60 calories instead of 600. So that makes a little bit of difference, doesn't it? If you choose the animal flesh instead of the beans for even one meal a day, then after a week, you've consumed an extra 3,500 calories or 1 pound of weight. Do they indicate that anywhere in their ludicrous recommendations? Why put animal flesh in a protein group with eggs, peanut butter, beans, peas, and lentils? Why not put it in a saturated fat group with cheese and oils? I'll tell you why, because protein is being sold to us as something wonderful. If you want to sell meat, you need to market it as protein, as if that's something that we're all badly lacking. But there isn't one person in any hospital in America today suffering from a protein deficiency. It doesn't exist. Many people suffer in all kinds of ways from fiber deficiency. What you are looking at here in this My Plate recommendation, what you're looking at here is a negotiated compromise between science and culture. All the science, all of it, tells us to eat fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, and have a fiber-rich diet. The culture and economic forces tell us to eat animal flesh and dairy. If you do so, you consume so many calories that you can't have too much of the healthy stuff. So the compromise is eat a little bit of the healthy stuff, but leave plenty of room for the stuff that makes you fat and sick. This is your tax dollars at work. Why do we believe that nutrition is a controversial subject? There's no conflict between science and science. There's no serious debate on the science. There's a conflict between science and culture. The culture is resisting the science, and hucksters fill the void, reinforcing the prejudices of the culture. Why don't we believe and act upon all the science that tells us not to eat meat? We love our mommies, our culture. Collectively, we hide our eyes from an obvious truth that improved health, longer life, cleaner air and water, greater food security, restored biodiversity, and a livable planet would far outweigh the small burden of changing our eating habits taught to us by mommy and daddy.